If the Brain Was an App podcast, episode 7, The Lie of Feel Good Chemicals. Hello, and welcome to If the Brain Was an App, the expanded interface, this place called Earth series exploring perception, programming, and the hidden architecture of the human mind. In the last episode, we explored the electrical language of life. We looked at signal before story, rhythm before reaction, and how the brain does not simply think in words, but speaks through electricity, chemistry, timing, rhythm, sensation, breath, and state. In this episode, we move into one of the most oversimplified areas of modern brain culture, the idea of feel-good chemicals. The pleasure button myth. You have probably heard the phrases before. Dopamine is the pleasure chemical. Serotonin is the happiness chemical. Oxytocin is the love chemical. Endorphins are the body's natural high. These descriptions are not empty, but they are dangerously incomplete. They turn living systems into slogans. They make the brain sound like it has little happiness buttons we simply need to press in the correct order. Do this for dopamine, do that for serotonin. Hug someone for oxytocin, exercise for endorphins, and on the surface, it sounds useful, it sounds simple, it sounds empowering, but the brain is not a vending machine for feelings, it is a living regulatory system. That is the pleasure button myth. The modern world often sells us the idea that we can hack happiness by triggering the right chemistry. Scroll for stimulation, eat for comfort, shop for a reward, post for validation, chase novelty for excitement. Watch another clip, check another notification, take another bite, refresh the feed, find the next hit. The promise is that we are moving towards pleasure, but very often, we are only being pulled deeper into loops of seeking, relief, anticipation, and return. Your brain does not have happiness buttons. It has signal loops that can be regulated, trained, exploited, or trapped. That distinction matters, because dopamine is not simply pleasure. It is deeply involved in pursuit, anticipation, salience, motivation, and reward prediction. It pulls attention towards the possibility. It says there might be something here. It helps the system learn what to seek, what to repeat, and what might matter. But wanting is not the same as satisfaction. Seeking is not the same as nourishment. A loop can keep you reaching without ever really feeding you. That is why you can scroll for 20 minutes and not feel fulfilled. You may not even feel good, but something in the system keeps looking for the next thing. The next post, the next message, the next number, the next image, the next emotional spike, the next possible reward. The system is not necessarily enjoying itself. It is anticipated. This is one of the great confusions of modern life. We often mistake being pulled for being nourished. We mistake stimulation for meaning. We mistake relief for healing. We mistake chemical movement for genuine well-being. Serotonin is also simplified into happiness, but it is more deeply tied to regulation, mood stability, bodily rhythms, social context, appetite, sleep, and many other processes. To call it the happiness chemical may be memorable, but it misses the wider system. Happiness is not a single chemical. It is a relationship between body, state, meaning, safety, rhythm, connection, perception, memory, and environment. Oxytocin is often called the love chemical, but even that is too simple. It is involved in bonding, trust, closeness, social salience, and attachment, but bonding is not always healthy just because it feels powerful. People can bond to groups, partners, rituals, ideologies, and systems that do not always liberate them. A chemical associated with attachment does not automatically guarantee wisdom, truth, or safety. It can deepen connection, but connection itself can be shaped by context. Endorphins can reduce pain and create relief. They can support survival, movement, endurance, and even a sense of ease. But relief is not always resolution. Sometimes the system learns to chase whatever interrupts discomfort fastest. Food, screens, drama, sexual stimulation, outrage, overwork, exercise, distraction, or emotional intensity can all become ways of shifting state quickly. But a quick shift is not always regulation. This is where the lie becomes subtle. The lie is not that these chemicals matter. They absolutely matter. The lie is that they work like buttons. The lie is that the goal of life is to press them as often as possible. The lie is that feeling good in the short term means the system is being restored. The lie is that every pleasurable pull is a sign of genuine need. Not everything that feels good is regulating you. Some things feel good because they briefly interrupt the discomfort. That line sits at the center of this episode. Because many of the loops people struggle with do not begin with pleasure. They begin with discomfort, restlessness, loneliness, fatigue, stress, shame, boredom, emotional pain, disconnection, a sense of emptiness. A signal that the system does not know how to hold. Then something offers a quick change in state. A screen, a snack, a purchase, a message, a drink, a fantasy, a video, a reaction, a hit of attention, a moment of validation. For a few seconds, the discomfort shifts. The body feels interruption and calls it relief. But relief can train a loop. The system learns, when I feel this, do that. When I feel empty, scroll. When I feel tired, I reach for sugar. When I feel unseen, post. When I feel anxious, I check. When I feel lonely, I seek attention. When I feel powerless, enter outrage. When I feel flat, chase stimulation. When I feel bored, I look for novelty. Over time, the behavior becomes less about pleasure and more about escaping the signal that came before it. This is why awareness is so important. If you only ask, what makes me feel good, you may miss the deeper question. What loop is this training in me? Some pleasures restore. Some pleasures connect. Some pleasures nourish. Music can regulate. Movement can energize. Food can comfort and sustain. Touch can bond. Laughter can release. Sunlight can lift. Creativity can organize emotion. Rest can repair. Deep conversation can settle the nervous system. There is nothing wrong with pleasure. Pleasure is part of life. The issue is whether the pleasure returns you to yourself or pulls you further away from yourself. That is the difference between regulation and hijacking. Regulation brings the system back into rhythm. Hijacking keeps the system chasing. Regulation leaves more capacity afterwards. Hijacking often leaves emptiness, shame, agitation, or the need for more. Regulation reconnects you with the body. Hijacking pulls attention away from the body. Regulation widens perception. Hijacking narrows it around the next cue. Modern reward systems understand this very well, even if they do not always speak about it in these terms. Notifications, likes, short videos, infinite scroll, gambling mechanics, algorithmic novelty, ultra-processed food, sexualized imagery, shopping platforms, outrage cycles, and social metrics all work by shaping anticipation. They do not simply offer pleasure. They train the system to return. The most powerful loops are not always the ones that give the biggest reward. They are often the ones who keep the reward uncertain. Maybe there will be a message. Maybe there will be a like. Maybe the next video will be better. Maybe the next post will confirm something. Maybe the next refresh will change the feeling. Maybe the next bite will soothe the ache. Maybe the next purchase will create the identity. Maybe the next hit will finally satisfy what the last hit did not. So the loop continues. This is why the phrase feel-good chemicals can be misleading. It makes the issue sound light, almost cute, as if we are only talking about mood boosts. But at the level of human behavior, these systems can shape attention, identity, desire, belief, belonging, and self-worth. They can be used to regulate us, but they can also be used to capture us. Social media is one of the clearest examples. It not only gives content, it gives measurable social feedback. Likes, comments, views, shares, follower counts, notifications, replies. Social approval becomes visible. Belonging becomes numerical. Attention becomes a metric. The person begins to feel the chemical pull of being seen, confirmed, reacted to, or included. And when the feedback is absent, the absence can also become a signal. Why did no one respond? Why did that post not land? Why did they ignore me? Why did someone else get more attention? A system designed around connection can quietly train dependency on validation. Again, this does not mean all online sharing is bad. Community can be real. Creativity can be meaningful. Visibility can help people find each other. But if the chemical loop becomes tied to external confirmation, the nervous system may begin outsourcing self-worth to the feed. The person may start creating not from expression, but from anticipation. Not what is true in me, but what will get a response. Not what needs to be said, but what will be rewarded. That is not just a technology problem. It is a nervous system problem. Sugar and ultra-processed foods reveal a similar pattern. The body may seek quick comfort when tired, stressed, lonely, or dysregulated. Sweetness, salt, fat, and texture can create rapid reward and relief. Sometimes that is ordinary human enjoyment, but sometimes the system learns to use food as a chemical shortcut because deeper regulation is unavailable. The issue is not moral failure. The issue is loop training. What signal came before the craving? What state was the body trying to shift? Was it hunger or exhaustion? Nourishment or emotional interruption? Need or compulsion? The same question applies across many behaviors. What was I feeling before I wanted this? What am I hoping this will change? Will this nourish me or only interrupt me? How do I feel 10 minutes afterwards? Those questions begin to interrupt the automatic loop. This is where episode 7 connects to the wider arc of the series. In episode 6, we learn that the brain speaks through signals. In this episode, we explore what happens when those signals are simplified, marketed, and manipulated into reward loops. The issue is not that the brain is weak. The issue is that the brain is adaptive. It learns from repetition. It follows cues. It seeks relief. It forms associations. It moves towards what changes state. And modern systems are very good at offering fast state change. This is also why behavioral manipulation and engineered craving connect so deeply with the wider themes of the Inversiverse. If you can shape what people seek, you can shape behavior without openly forcing them. If you can attach a reward to certain actions, identities, platforms, products, or beliefs, people may begin returning voluntarily. If you can make relief temporary and repetition easy, the system begins managing itself through the loop. In the language of the resonance matrix, reward is not just chemical. It has rhythm. It has timing. It has cues. It has repetition. The loop has a pulse. Discomfort, cue, seeking, reward, drop, return. The body learns the rhythm and the mind builds a story around it. In the consciousness code, awareness becomes the interruption between cue and behavior. It is the moment when the person notices the urge before obeying it. The moment where they ask, not only do I want this, but what is this wanting doing inside me? That small pause matters. It brings the loop into consciousness. So as we begin this episode, the invitation is not to become anti-pleasure. It is not to shame craving, desire, comfort, entertainment, food, sex, connection, or enjoyment. That would only create another split. The invitation is to become more honest about the difference between pleasure that restores and pleasure that captures. Some things feel good because they bring you back into rhythm, and some things feel good because they pull you away from the discomfort you have not yet learned to meet. That is the question we are moving into now. Not simply, what makes me feel good, but what is this loop training my nervous system to become? Part 2, Anchor Concept, Neurochemical Loops, not feel-good buttons. The anchor concept for this episode is that the popular idea of feel-good chemicals is too simplistic. Dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, and endorphins are real. They matter. They shape motivation, mood, bonding, relief, reward, pain, stress, attention, learning, and regulation. But they do not operate like simple switches. They are not little buttons inside the brain that we press to become happy, connected, motivated, or calm. The lie is not that these chemicals matter. The lie is that they work like buttons. That distinction is important because the modern world often talks about neurochemistry in a way that sounds empowering, but can become misleading. It gives us phrases that are easy to repeat: dopamine hit, serotonin boost, oxytocin release, endorphin rush. And there may be some truth in those phrases, but they can also flatten the complexity of the system. They can make us believe that the goal is simply to trigger the right chemical as often as possible, when the deeper question is whether the system is being regulated, nourished, and returned to coherence. The oversimplified model says, chemical equals feeling, dopamine equals pleasure. They may open the phone because they feel restless, bored, tired, lonely, or slightly uncomfortable. At first, there is a shift. Novelty appears. Images appear. Notifications appear. The system receives cues. Maybe the next post will be interesting. Maybe there will be a message. Maybe there will be something funny, shocking, attractive, validating, or emotionally stimulating. The brain keeps seeking. But seeking is not the same as satisfaction. The person may continue scrolling long after the pleasure has faded. They are not necessarily enjoying themselves. They are being pulled by possibility. The loop keeps saying, maybe the next one. That is not deep nourishment. That is a trained seeking pattern. The same happens with sugar or junk food. There may be comfort, pleasure, taste, relief, and reward. Food is not only fuel, it is emotional, social, sensory, and cultural. But when the system is tired, stressed, undernourished, lonely, or dysregulated, quick reward foods can become a way of shifting state fast. The body receives sweetness, salt, fat, texture, energy, and comfort. For a moment, something changes. There is relief. There is an interruption. Then there may be a crash. Fatigue returns. Mood dips. Shame appears. The body feels heavier. The system wants more. The loop continues. Again, the issue is not moral failure. It is not about shaming pleasure or food. The question is, what loop is being trained? Is the body being nourished, or is discomfort being interrupted? Is the behavior restoring rhythm, or creating a short spike followed by depletion? This is the difference between relief and regulation. Relief can be quick. Regulation is deeper. Relief interrupts discomfort. Regulation changes the conditions that created the discomfort. Relief may be necessary sometimes. Human beings need relief. But if relief becomes the only strategy, the system can become dependent on whatever gives the fastest shift. The brain learns the shortcut. The body begins asking for the behavior whenever the old discomfort appears. That is how loops form. Serotonin is another example of oversimplification. Calling it the happiness chemical misses the wider picture. Serotonin is involved in mood, appetite, sleep, bodily rhythms, social behavior, and regulation, among many other processes. But happiness is not a simple chemical output. Happiness, or perhaps a more grounded word would be well-being, emerges from many conditions: safety, rhythm, sleep, nourishment, meaning, purpose, connection, sunlight, movement, body state, memory, and perception. A person may chase a serotonin boost, but if the wider life rhythm is fragmented, if sleep is poor, if stress is chronic, if social connection is shallow, if the body is inflamed or exhausted, and if meaning is absent, no simple chemical slogan will explain the whole state. The living system is more complex than that. Oxytocin also gets reduced too easily. It is often called the love chemical, but bonding is not always simple, and not all bonding is healthy. Oxytocin may participate in trust, closeness, attachment, social salience, and bonding, but it can also strengthen loyalty to a group, a partner, a ritual, or a system. That means the feeling of closeness does not automatically prove that something is wise, safe, or true. A person can bond with someone who is not good for them. A group can feel emotionally powerful while becoming closed, defensive, or hostile to outsiders. A ritual can create belonging while also reinforcing dependency. This is important for understanding relationships and social systems. Bonding chemistry can make something feel meaningful. It can make a person feel connected, seen, held, or part of something. But the connection still needs discernment. The body may bond before the mind has assessed the pattern. The feeling of belonging can become so strong that leaving the loop feels like losing oneself. So oxytocin is not simply love. It is part of the biology of attachment, and attachment can be healing or imprisoning depending on the wider context. Endorphins bring another layer. They can reduce pain and create feelings of relief, ease, or even euphoria. They can support exercise, endurance, laughter, emotional release, and survival. But again, relief is not always the same as healing. A behavior may reduce discomfort temporarily while leaving the underlying pattern unchanged. This can happen through distraction, stimulation, overwork, intense exercise, emotional drama, sexual stimulation, food, screens, or any activity that shifts the state quickly. Sometimes that shift is healthy, sometimes it restores, sometimes it is needed, but sometimes it becomes an escape route that the system repeats because it does not yet know how to metabolize discomfort directly. That is why we have to understand these chemicals as loops rather than buttons. A loop has a cue, a state, an action, a reward, a drop, and a return. The loop not only affects mood, it begins shaping identity and behavior. That is why the wider model matters. Chemical loops shape seeking, bonding, pain, relief, motivation, social connection, and adaptation. They are not separate from life. They are how life becomes felt, reinforced, remembered, and repeated. But not all loops are hijacked. Some loops genuinely regulate us. Exercise can create a deeper regulatory loop. Movement can shift mood, improve energy, release tension, support sleep, and reconnect the person with the body. Sunlight can help regulate circadian rhythm, mood, and wakefulness. Music can reorganize the state through rhythm, memory, breath, and emotion. Meaningful action can create fulfillment that does not come from a quick hit, but from alignment. Connection can settle the nervous system when it is grounded, mutual, and real. These forms of regulation often feel different from quick rewards. They may not always give the fastest spike. They may take more time. They may require presence. But afterwards, the system often feels more coherent, more returned, more connected, more available. This is one of the ways to tell the difference. A hijacked loop often leaves you needing more. A regulating loop often leaves you more able to be with what is already here. After scrolling, you may feel scattered. After a walk, you may feel clearer. After sugar, you may feel briefly soothed, then depleted. After real nourishment, you may feel steadier. After validation, you may feel lifted, then dependent on the next response. After a meaningful connection, you may feel more grounded in yourself. After stimulation, you may feel pulled outward. After regulation, you often feel returned inward. This is not absolute, but it is a useful pattern to observe. The key is not to become suspicious of pleasure. Pleasure is not the enemy. Pleasure can be holy in the simplest human sense. The warmth of sunlight, a good meal, laughter, music, touch, movement, rest, creativity, beauty, connection, relief after pain. These things matter. A life without pleasure becomes rigid, dry, and disconnected. The issue is whether pleasure supports life or replaces life. When pleasure supports life, it deepens rhythm. When pleasure replaces life, it becomes a loop that keeps us from meeting what is actually asking for attention. That is why the central question in this episode is not, how do I get more feel-good chemicals? It is, what is my system learning to seek, and what is that seeking doing to me? Because the brain learns through repetition. If it repeatedly learns that discomfort should be answered with scrolling, then scrolling becomes the path. If it learns that loneliness should be answered with validation, then validation becomes the path. If it learns that tiredness should be answered with sugar, then sugar becomes the path. If it learns that boredom should be answered with novelty, then novelty becomes the path. If it learns that emptiness should be answered with consumption, then consumption becomes the path. But if it learns that discomfort can be met with breath, movement, honest reflection, creative expression, direct connection, rest, nourishment, and awareness, then different loops become possible. That is the deeper freedom. Not freedom from chemistry, but freedom through understanding the loops chemistry participates in. We are not trying to become machines that regulate perfectly. We are trying to become conscious enough to recognize when a loop is feeding us and when it is feeding on us. The oversimplified model says chemical equals feeling. The wider model says chemical loops participate in the entire ecology of human behavior. Pleasure, motivation, bonding, relief, reward, and regulation are system-level processes. So the anchor concept is this: dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, and endorphins are real and important, but they do not operate as simple switches. Their effects depend on context, timing, receptors, expectation, behavior, and environment. The lie is not that these chemicals matter. That is powerful. Without that seeking system, life would become flat. Motivation would collapse. We would not pursue food, connection, exploration, learning, creativity, achievement, discovery, or meaning. Dopamine is not the enemy. It is part of the movement, part of curiosity, part of vitality. But seeking can become detached from fulfillment. That is where the modern loop becomes dangerous. A person may not be experiencing pleasure in the deep sense. They may be experiencing pursuit, the possibility of pleasure, the anticipation of something meaningful, the pull of the next cue, the next message, the next clip, the next notification, the next purchase, the next bite, the next response, the next emotional spike. The brain keeps leaning forward, and that leaning forward can feel like desire. But wanting is not the same as being nourished. This is why scrolling can become so revealing. The person may open a phone because they feel restless, tired, bored, lonely, anxious, or slightly empty. The feed offers a possibility immediately. There may be something funny, something shocking, something affirming, something outrageous, something beautiful, something validating, something that confirms a belief, something that distracts from the body, something that creates a momentary lift. So the system keeps going, not necessarily because it is satisfied, but because the next thing might satisfy. That is dopamine as seeking. The loop says maybe the next one, the next post, the next refresh, the next like, the next short video, the next comment, the next piece of information. And because the reward is unpredictable, the loop becomes stronger. Sometimes there is a hit. Sometimes there is nothing. Sometimes there is irritation. Sometimes there is amusement. Sometimes there is validation. Sometimes there is outrage. The uncertainty keeps the system engaged. This is why wanting without fulfillment can become exhausting. The nervous system is moving but not arriving. The brain is seeking, but not settling. Attention is captured, but not restored. And afterwards, the person may feel flatter, more scattered, more dissatisfied, or more disconnected than before. The loop did not feed them. It kept them hungry. This also happens beyond technology. It can happen with shopping, gambling, sexual stimulation, food, status, argument, productivity, and even spiritual or intellectual searching. The person is not always seeking the thing itself. They are seeking the state change, the shift, the possibility, the momentary sense that something might resolve the discomfort. A new idea might finally explain everything. A new purchase might finally create the self-image. A new romantic message might finally prove worth. A new conspiracy might finally make the chaos feel coherent. A new achievement might finally silence inadequacy. A new video might finally give the insight. A new hit might finally change the feeling. But the system can keep seeking without ever truly integrating. That is the hidden danger of the dopamine story. When dopamine is reduced to pleasure, we miss the fact that the loop may be active even when pleasure is absent. The person may say, "Why do I keep doing this if I don't even enjoy it?" And the answer may be that enjoyment is not the main engine anymore. Anticipation is, relief is, habit is. The nervous system has learned the route. This leads into the second hidden layer. Relief can become mistaken for healing. Relief is real. Relief matters. When the system is in pain, when the body is overwhelmed, when the mind is exhausted, when the emotional field is too much, relief can feel like mercy. There is nothing wrong with needing relief. Sometimes, relief is the first step towards regulation. Sometimes a distraction helps us survive a moment we cannot yet process. Sometimes food comforts. Sometimes laughter breaks the tension. Sometimes a film, a walk, music, or even a harmless scroll gives the system a break. The issue is not relief itself. The issue is when relief becomes the only strategy and is mistaken for healing. Endorphins, distraction, stimulation, food, scrolling, validation, and other quick state shifters may reduce discomfort temporarily. The body feels a change. The ache quietens. The anxiety drops. The loneliness is covered. The shame is interrupted. The fatigue is masked. The boredom disappears. The person feels better, and because they feel better, the mind concludes that the behavior helped. But did it help the underlying signal, or only mute it? That question matters. If someone feels lonely and receives online validation, there may be a genuine lift. They feel seen. They feel noticed. They feel less alone for a moment. But if the deeper need is for grounded connection, emotional intimacy, belonging, or self-recognition, the validation may not heal the loneliness. It may briefly interrupt it. And when the feeling returns, the person may need more validation to interrupt it again. If someone is exhausted and reaches for sugar, they may feel energy, comfort, and reward. But if the deeper need is rest, nutrition, rhythm, or reduced pressure, the sugar may not restore the system. It may only create a temporary shift, followed by another crash. If someone is anxious and scrolls for distraction, the anxiety may move into the background for a while. But if the deeper signal is unresolved fear, stress, overwhelm, or a boundary that needs attention, the scroll may not regulate the system. It may only delay the meeting. This is how relief loops can become traps. They work just enough to be repeated, but not deeply enough to resolve the need. Because they work temporarily, they are easy to defend. It helps me relax. It takes the edge off. It makes me feel better. It gives me something to look forward to. It's not a big deal. Sometimes that may be true. But the question is what happens afterwards? Does the system feel more coherent, more grounded, more able to meet life? Or does it return quickly to the same discomfort, now with a stronger habit attached? Relief is not false because it is temporary. Many healthy things are temporary. A meal does not feed you forever. Sleep does not rest you forever. Conversation does not connect you forever. But healthy regulation tends to build capacity over time. It leaves something behind, a steadier rhythm, a clearer mind, a more connected body, a deeper ability to stay present, a restored sense of self. A hijacked relief loop often leaves depletion behind, shame, craving, numbness, agitation, fragmentation, more wanting, less presence. This is one way to tell the difference. Not by judging the behavior morally, but by observing the after effect. How do I feel 10 minutes later? How do I feel an hour later? Did this bring me closer to myself or further away? Did this help me meet the signal or avoid it? Did this restore rhythm or intensify the loop? These are practical questions because the body often knows the answer. After a regulating experience, the body may feel more settled, open, steady, or real. After a hijacked loop, the body may feel flat buzzed, guilty, foggy, or still hungry for more. This is not about perfection, it is about literacy. The third hidden layer is that bonding chemicals can create attachment to unhealthy loops. Oxytocin is often called the love chemical, but love is not a simple chemical event, and bonding is not always wise. Oxytocin can strengthen trust, closeness, social belonging, attachment, and loyalty. That can be beautiful. It can support parenting, intimacy, friendship, group cohesion, compassion, and repair. But bonding is powerful precisely because it can attach us to things that are not always healthy. A person can bond to a partner who repeatedly hurts them. A group can create belonging while discouraging independent thought. A ritual can feel sacred while becoming controlling. A community can provide warmth while narrowing perception. A belief system can feel like home while making questioning feel like betrayal. A repeated emotional cycle can feel like love because the nervous system has learned the rhythm of rupture and repair. That last one matters. Sometimes people are bonded not only to comfort but to intensity. The emotional spike, the conflict, the apology, the relief, the reunion, the promise, the hope. The loop becomes familiar. The body begins confusing activation with connection. It does not feel calm, but it feels meaningful. It does not feel safe, but it feels alive. It does not restore the person, but it keeps them attached. This is where bonding chemistry can become part of a loop. Oxytocin is not simply a guarantee of healthy love. It may deepen attachment to whatever the system associates with closeness, safety, identity, belonging, or relief. If the wider context is healthy, that can support regulation. If the context is manipulative, unstable, coercive, or identity-bound, the same bonding processes may make it harder to leave. This connects to groups as well. Humans need belonging. We need community. We need shared language, recognition, and relational safety. But belonging can be hijacked. A group can reward loyalty, punish doubt, and create emotional consequences for leaving. The person may feel warmth inside the group and threat outside it. They may feel seen by the group and alienated from outsiders. They may experience agreement as connection and disagreement as rejection. Over time, the nervous system bonds not only to people, but to the group frame. That is where social belonging becomes perceptual. The group does not merely give companionship. It gives reality. It tells the person what to notice, what to fear, what to mock, what to defend, what to repeat, and what to treat as truth. Leaving the group then does not feel like changing an opinion. It feels like losing a nervous system anchor. This is why unhealthy loops can feel sacred, romantic, moral, or necessary from the inside. The feeling of attachment becomes evident. If this feels so powerful, it must mean something. And it may mean something. But power is not the same as health. Intensity is not the same as truth. Bonding is not the same as freedom. The same applies to systems and rituals. A person may bond to a routine that gives relief, even if the routine slowly narrows life. They may bond to an identity that gives belonging, even if it prevents growth. The point is not to shame this. Shame often strengthens the loop because shame itself becomes another discomfort that needs relief. The point is to become conscious, to notice the difference between a pleasure that restores and a pleasure that extracts, a bond that frees and a bond that traps, a relief that supports healing and a relief that replaces it, a desire that comes from life and a desire that comes from dysregulation. Because when we do not notice the difference, the loop makes choices for us. The system says, check the phone, eat the sugar, seek the like, return to the person, enter the argument, watch another video, buy the item, chase the feeling, prove the identity, repeat the ritual, and each time the loop is followed, it becomes more familiar. The behavior becomes easier, the pause becomes harder. Awareness is the pause. It is the moment where you ask, what was I feeling before the urge? What discomfort am I trying to interrupt? Is this true desire or trained seeking? Is this a connection or validation? Is this a regulation or relief? Is this bond nourishing me or keeping me loyal to something that narrows me? That pause may be small, but it changes the relationship to the loop. You may still choose the behavior, but now there is consciousness in it. And once consciousness enters the loop is no longer completely invisible. This is also where compassion matters. The nervous system does not seek relief because it is bad. It seeks relief because it is trying to help. It wants to move away from discomfort. It wants a connection. It wants safety. It wants energy. It wants certainty. It wants belonging. It wants a shift. The loop is often an attempted solution, even when it becomes a problem. So instead of attacking the loop, we can ask what need it is trying to serve. If I scroll, maybe I need rest, connection, novelty, or avoidance from pressure. If I crave sugar, maybe I need energy, comfort, grounding, or care. If I seek validation, maybe I need recognition, belonging, or self-trust. If I keep returning to intensity, maybe calm feels unfamiliar. If I keep chasing stimulation, maybe stillness brings up something I have not wanted to feel. That is where healing begins, not by condemning the behavior, but by listening to the signal underneath it. Then the regulation can become more intelligent. Instead of only interrupting discomfort, we begin meeting it. Instead of only chasing the chemical shift, we create conditions for a deeper shift. Instead of depending on quick relief, we build slower forms of nourishment. Movement, sunlight, sleep, real food, music, creativity, connection, honest conversation, meaningful work, breath, silence, boundaries, and self-recognition. These do not always give the fastest hit, but they may return the system to itself, and that is the difference. So the hidden layer is not that feel-good chemicals are fake, they are real. The hidden layer is that their role is more complex than popular culture admits. Dopamine can create wanting without fulfillment. Relief can be mistaken for healing. Bonding can attach us to unhealthy loops. A good feeling can be part of regulation, but it can also be part of capture. Not everything that feels good is regulating you. Some things feel good because they briefly interrupt the discomfort, and the work is to become conscious enough to tell the difference. Part 4, the expansion field, addiction loops and modern reward systems. This is where the episode moves from chemistry into culture, behavior, technology, markets, and engineered craving. Because reward loops do not only happen inside the brain by accident, they can be trained through repetition. The system learns cues, anticipation, action, reward, and return. Something triggers the urge. The body leans forward, the behavior happens, a reward, relief, or possible reward appears. Then the system remembers the route and becomes more likely to repeat it. Modern life is full of these loops: notifications, likes, gambling mechanics, scrolling, algorithmic novelty, shopping, sexual stimulation, sugar and ultra-processed foods, market charts, breaking news, price alerts, comment threads, short-form video. Each one can become a cue that pulls the nervous system into anticipation. This is why modern reward systems are so powerful. They are not only giving people pleasure, they are training timing, attention, expectation, and desire. The strongest loops often use variable rewards. You do not know exactly when the reward will arrive. Maybe there is a message, maybe there is not. Maybe the next post is useful, maybe it is pointless. Maybe the price moves, maybe it reverses, maybe the trade works, maybe it fails, maybe the notification matters, maybe it does not. That uncertainty keeps the system engaged. The brain does not only respond to reward, it responds to the possibility of reward. This is something I have noticed clearly through technical trading, stocks, shares, and crypto as well. When you are watching charts, candles, price movements, indicators, entries, exits, pumps, volume, sentiment, and sudden movement, the nervous system can become pulled into a reward prediction loop. It is not only about money, it is about anticipation. Is this the move? Is this the reversal? Is this the breakout? Did I miss it? Should I enter? Should I hold? Should I sell? The chart becomes a living signal field. Green candles can create excitement. Red candles can create a threat. A price alert can change your body before you have even opened the app. That world can teach you a lot about human psychology. It shows how quickly attention becomes captured by possibility. It shows how uncertainty can become addictive. It shows how hope and fear can alternate inside the same system. One moment the body feels reward, the next threat. One moment there is confidence, the next doubt. And if you are not conscious, the loop can start making decisions before the whole self has entered the room. This connects directly to the wider work in my Unfiltered Human on the Fringe series, because trading is not only a financial behavior, it is emotional behavior, nervous system behavior, and identity behavior. It can bring up greed, fear, regret, shame, control, impulsivity, patience, discipline, and the need to be right. A person may believe they are reading the chart objectively, but the body may be reading potential loss, potential gain, social validation, status, or relief from uncertainty. The reward system is not separate from the strategy. This is why the loop matters more than the object. The object may be a stock chart, a crypto candle, a gambling app, a social media feed, a shopping basket, a notification, or a sugar craving. Different forms, same architecture, cue, anticipation, action, reward, return. Social media makes this especially visible because social approval becomes measurable. Likes, comments, views, shares, subscribers, follow accounts, these become chemical cues. They turn recognition into numbers. They make belonging visible. They allow the nervous system to check whether the world has responded. And because the reward is unpredictable, the person keeps returning. Maybe this post lands. Maybe this comment gets attention. Maybe this video will grow. Maybe someone replies. Maybe the algorithm finally pushes it. The danger is that the person can begin seeking external confirmation of worth. Expression becomes tied to response. Creativity becomes tied to metrics. Visibility becomes tied to self-belief. The nervous system begins asking, did they see me? Before the deeper self asks, was this true? And when the numbers are low, the body may feel rejection, even when nothing meaningful has actually been lost. This is not because people are weak. It is because humans are social. We are built to respond to recognition, belonging, and feedback. But once those ancient social signals are quantified and fed back through algorithmic systems, something very old in the human nervous system gets placed inside something very modern and highly engineered. Sugar and ultra-processed foods operate through a different route, but the principle is similar. They can create rapid reward and comfort patterns. The body may seek a quick chemical shift when tired, stressed, lonely, undernourished, bored, or dysregulated. A sweet taste, a salty crunch, a fatty texture, a fast hit of energy, these can feel like comfort, and sometimes they are. But if the system learns to answer every form of discomfort with quick reward, it may begin relief-seeking rather than root regulation. This is not about moralizing food. It is about noticing the loop. Was I hungry, or was I exhausted? Did I need nourishment, or did I need comfort? Did I need energy, or did I need rest? Did I need sweetness, or did I need connection? Did the food restore me, or did it briefly interrupt a signal I did not want to feel? The same applies to stimulation more broadly. Short videos, pornography, shopping, drama, outrage, compulsive checking, and constant novelty can all become ways of shifting state quickly. The nervous system learns when discomfort appears, seek a spike. When boredom appears, seek novelty. When loneliness appears, seek validation. When uncertainty appears, seek information. When shame appears, seek distraction. When fatigue appears, seek stimulation. Over time, desire itself becomes shaped by available reward systems. We may think we simply want what we want, but the environment trains us to want. Algorithms learn what captures us. They learn what keeps us scrolling, clicking, watching, reacting, hoping, comparing, and returning. They do not need to know our souls. They only need to learn our patterns. They learn what makes the loop continue, and then the system begins wanting what keeps the loop active, not always what restores the person. That is the hijacking of desire. A person may desire the phone, but what they need is connection. They may desire sugar, but what they need is rest. They may desire trading action, but what they need is patience, discipline, or distance from volatility. They may desire validation, but what they need is self-trust. They may desire outrage, but what they need is agency. They may desire constant information, but what they need is orientation. This is where the inversiverse connects strongly within the broader field of my work. Behavioral manipulation does not always look like someone forcing you. It can look like systems learning your reward loops and feeding them back to you. Engineered craving is subtle because it feels like a choice. You click, you scroll, you check, you buy, you enter, you refresh. but the environment has been structured around your nervous system's vulnerabilities. In the resonance matrix, this becomes a matter of reward, rhythm, state, and language loops. The queue has rhythm. The platform has rhythm. The chart has rhythm. The feed has rhythm. Even the language around it shapes the state. Breaking, urgent, last chance. Moon crash by now. Don't miss out. Everyone is talking about this. Words become part of the reward field. They create anticipation and urgency before reflection has settled. In the consciousness code, awareness is the interruption between cue and behavior. The loop wants speed. Awareness introduces space. The loop says, do it now. Awareness asks, what state am I in? The loop says, this will change how you feel. Awareness asks, for how long and at what cost? The loop says, you need this. Awareness asks, what do I actually need? That pause may seem small, but it is where freedom begins. Because once you can see the cue, the anticipation, the action, the reward, and the return, the loop is no longer invisible. You may still choose the behavior. You may still scroll, trade, eat, watch, buy, post, or check, but you are no longer completely inside the spell of it. You can begin to ask whether the behavior is regulating you, feeding you, teaching you, or simply keeping you hungry. Modern reward systems are powerful because they do not only target pleasure, they target repetition, they train the body to return, they attach a reward to uncertainty. They create loops where relief becomes dependency, validation becomes identity, stimulation becomes normal, and desire becomes externally shaped. So the expansion field of this episode is not anti-pleasure. It is anti-unconscious capture. It is a call to notice where your wanting has been trained, to notice where your nervous system has learned to seek relief instead of root regulation, to notice where the environment is shaping desire before the deeper self has spoken. Because the question is not only, what do I want? The deeper question is, who or what has trained me to want this, and what is this wanting doing to my system? Part 5 Field Case. The scroll that doesn't satisfy this field case is simple on the surface, but it reveals the architecture of modern reward loops with almost uncomfortable clarity. A person feels restless, tired, slightly uncomfortable, or emotionally unsettled. Nothing dramatic has happened. There is no clear crisis. Just a subtle signal in the body, something is off. Instead of sitting with it or even noticing it fully, the person reaches for the phone just for a minute. That moment is the cue. Not the phone itself, but the internal state that precedes it. Restlessness, fatigue, boredom, low-level anxiety, emotional discomfort. The body is signaling something, but the system has learned a faster route than listening. So the action begins. The phone opens, the feed loads. Immediately the nervous system is met with novelty. A short video, a post, a headline, a comment, a meme, a message, something amusing, something irritating, something visually striking, something emotionally charged, something socially relevant, something to react to, something to compare against, something to agree with, something to reject, and this is where the shift happens. Dopamine seeking activates, not as pleasure, but as anticipation. The system leans forward. Maybe the next thing will be better. Maybe the next clip will be funny. Maybe the next post will be useful. Maybe the next message will feel good. Maybe there is something here worth finding. So the thumb moves again. Scroll. Another input. Another fragment. Another emotional tone. Another possibility. The body registers microshifts, slight amusement, mild irritation, brief curiosity, low-level comparison, momentary distraction. None of them is fully satisfying. None of them is deeply nourishing. But each one is enough to keep the system engaged. Scroll. The time passes, but the state does not resolve. In fact, something subtle begins to happen. The person is no longer just distracted. They are now inside the loop. Attention has been captured. The original discomfort is no longer in the foreground, but it has not disappeared either. It has been covered, layered over by stimulation, but not processed. Scroll. Now the system is not asking, how do I feel? It is asking, what's next? That is the shift from presence to anticipation, from being with the moment to chasing the next moment, from awareness to seeking, and this is where the confusion begins. The person may think they are enjoying the scroll. After all, they are still doing it. But if they slow down and check, the experience may not feel like enjoyment. It may feel like a compulsion, like momentum, like being carried, like not quite being able to stop, like something unfinished. Because the system is not necessarily experiencing pleasure. It is chasing the next possible reward. That is the key distinction. Pleasure tends to have a sense of completion. There is a moment where the body says, that was good. There is a natural pause, a settling, a return. The experience lands. It integrates. It feeds something real. The scroll rarely does that. Instead, it creates continuation. The loop does not want completion. It wants to return. It wants the next cue, the next anticipation, the next action, the next possibility. It keeps the system slightly unsatisfied so that it keeps going. This is why the scroll that doesn't satisfy can last far longer than intended. A minute becomes 10. 10 becomes 20. 20 becomes an hour. Not because the person consciously chose that, but because the loop was never designed to end in satisfaction. It was designed to maintain engagement. Relief from discomfort becomes confused with enjoyment. At the beginning, the person felt something uncomfortable, restlessness, fatigue, emotional tension. The scroll interrupts that feeling. It gives the system something else to process, something external, something stimulating, something that pulls attention away from the body. That interruption can feel like relief. The discomfort is no longer center stage. The mind is occupied. The body is engaged. The feeling is quieter. So the system says this is helping. But relief is not the same as nourishment. Because underneath the distraction, the original signal often remains unresolved. The fatigue is still there. The emotional discomfort is still there. The restlessness may even be increasing because the system is being stimulated rather than settled. So when the scroll ends, something interesting happens. The person does not always feel better. They may feel more scattered, more tired, more disconnected, more dissatisfied. The relief was temporary. The cost was subtle but real, and this is where attention becomes captured by anticipation. The loop does not need to feel good in a deep sense. It only needs to keep the system expecting that something good might be coming. That possibility is enough. The brain leans into uncertainty. The next scroll might be the one. The next video might hit. The next post might matter. The next message might land. So the system stays. This is the same architecture seen in gambling, trading, and other variable reward systems. The uncertainty is the hook. The unpredictability is the engine. If every scroll delivered exactly what the person needed, the loop would end quickly. But because the reward is inconsistent, the system stays engaged, searching, hoping, anticipating, and this is where the field case becomes personal. Most people recognize this pattern in themselves at some level. The intention is small. Just a minute. The outcome is larger. The feeling afterwards is not what was expected. There is often a quiet recognition, that didn't actually satisfy me, but the loop repeats anyway. Why? Because the system has learned that this behavior changes state quickly. It may not resolve the deeper signal, but it interrupts it. It offers relief, even if temporary. And when discomfort appears again later, the body remembers the route. It does not remember the dissatisfaction as strongly as it remembers the interruption. So it reaches again. This is how the loop maintains itself, not by deeply feeding the person, but by repeatedly interrupting discomfort just enough to be chosen again. The danger is not in scrolling itself. It is in unconscious repetition. It is in mistaking the interruption for resolution. It is in losing awareness of the cue that started the loop. Because if you return to the beginning of the sequence, the most important moment is not the scroll. It is the feeling before the scroll, the restlessness, the fatigue, the emotional discomfort, the subtle signal that something needed attention. That is where the real information is. If that moment is missed, the system moves into the loop. If that moment is noticed, something different becomes possible. A pause, not a forced stop. Not a rule, just a moment of awareness. What am I actually feeling right now? What is my system signaling? What am I about to use this for? That pause may reveal something unexpected. Maybe the body needs rest, not stimulation. Maybe it needs movement. Maybe it needs water. Maybe it needs a break from input. Maybe it needs a connection. Maybe it needs silence. Maybe it needs to feel something that has been avoided. And even if the person still chooses to scroll, the relationship has changed. It is no longer automatic. It is no longer invisible. It is no longer purely reactive. This is where the key line becomes clear. The loop is not feeding you. It is keeping you hungry. Because hunger keeps the loop alive. Satisfaction would end it. Completion would close it. Nourishment would reduce the need to return. But the scroll does something else. It keeps the system in motion. It keeps attention slightly unsatisfied. It keeps the body leaning forward. It keeps the possibility alive without delivering a resolution. This is why the field case matters beyond social media. The same pattern can appear in other areas of life. In trading, constantly checking charts without stepping back. In relationships, seeking validation without a deeper connection. In food, eating for comfort without nourishment. In productivity, staying busy without direction. In learning, consuming information without integration. Different forms, same loop. A cue, an anticipation, an action, a temporary shift and a return. So the practice here is not to eliminate the loop. That is not realistic. The practice is to see it. To recognize the moment where the system moves from presence into seeking. To notice when anticipation replaces awareness. To feel when the behavior is feeding you versus when it is simply continuing itself. Once you can see that, something subtle changes. You begin to recognize that the discomfort you were trying to escape may actually be the doorway, the signal that needed attention, the part of the system asking for something deeper than interruption, and in that moment, you have a choice, not between scroll or don't scroll as a rule, but between staying inside the loop or stepping outside it just long enough to ask what the system actually needs. That is where the pattern begins to loosen, not through force, but through awareness. Part 6, the cognitive shift. The cognitive shift in this episode is the movement from trusting every pleasant shift as nourishment to recognizing that some pleasant shifts are part of a trained loop. The old frame says, I do things because they make me feel good. The new frame says, some things feel good because they train my system to keep seeking them. That changes everything. Because once we believe a behavior is justified simply because it feels good, we stop examining what kind of good it creates. We do not ask whether it restores us, fragments us, steadies us, numbs us, connects us, distracts us, or keeps us wanting more. We simply feel the shift and assume the shift is evidence of benefit. But pleasure is not always nourishment. Nourishment has a different quality. It supports the system beyond the immediate moment. It leaves the body with more coherence, not less. It brings a sense of return, not just escape. It may be enjoyable, but it also gives something back. A meaningful conversation, a focused creative act, a slow meal, a walk, a piece of music that opens something real, a moment of silence that allows the body to settle. These may feel good, but the goodness is not only a spike, it integrates. Some pleasures do not integrate, they pull the system forward into continuation. They do not leave you fuller, they leave you reaching. That does not make them evil, but it does make them different. A behavior can feel good in the first few seconds, while quietly training the body to seek that same quick alteration again and again. Relief is not always regulation. Relief says the discomfort has reduced. Regulation says the system has become more able to meet what is here. That difference matters. Relief can happen through escape. Regulation happens through restored capacity. Relief may quiet the signal. Regulation helps us understand and hold the signal. Relief may interrupt the pressure. Regulation changes our relationship to the pressure. This is why a person can feel better for a moment and still not be better resourced. The state has shifted, but the underlying loop remains untouched. The system has not learned how to meet discomfort. It has learned how to avoid it more efficiently. Desire is not always authentic either. That is a difficult one, because we often treat wanting as proof. I want it, therefore it must be mine. I crave it, therefore I need it. I keep thinking about it, it matters. But desire can be trained. The nervous system can be conditioned to want what is available, repeated, rewarded, glamorized, forbidden, unpredictable, or socially reinforced. Wanting can emerge from life, but it can also emerge from exposure. This is why the deeper question is not only, what do I want? The deeper question is, where did this wanting come from? Did it emerge from the body's real need, from meaning, from creativity, from connection, from intuition, from love? Or did it emerge from repetition, advertising, comparison, fear of missing out, loneliness, boredom, or a loop that has learned how to pull me? A chemical shift is not the same as well-being. Well-being is not just a momentary change in state. It includes rhythm, recovery, relationship, meaning, integrity, bodily stability, and the ability to remain in life without constantly needing to escape it. A chemical shift may be part of well-being, but it can also be part of compulsion. The body can light up around something that does not actually serve it. The system can feel pulled towards something that leaves it less whole afterwards. This is where awareness becomes essential. The question is no longer only, does this feel good? The question becomes, what loop is this training in me? That question interrupts the spell of immediacy. It asks you to look beyond the first hit, beyond the first relief, beyond the first glow. It asks, what does this make more likely tomorrow? Does this train patience or urgency, presence or avoidance, connection or dependency, discernment or compulsion, self-trust or external seeking, regulation or repetition? This is not about becoming suspicious of every pleasure. A life without pleasure becomes another kind of distortion. The point is not to reject enjoyment, comfort, excitement, or desire. The point is to distinguish between pleasure that returns you to yourself and pleasure that teaches you to abandon yourself more efficiently. A regulating pleasure has an aftertaste of coherence. You feel more able to be present, more settled in your body, more available to life. Be more honest with yourself. A hijacked pleasure often has an aftertaste of depletion. You may feel foggier, emptier, more ashamed, more restless, or already looking for the next shift. The after effect tells the truth that the first hit may hide. So the cognitive shift is subtle but powerful. We move from asking whether something feels good in the moment to asking what kind of relationship it is building with our nervous system. Because every repeated behavior teaches something. Every loop rehearses a pattern. Every cue followed by an action strengthens a route. If I always answer boredom with stimulation, I train the system to fear stillness. If I always answer loneliness with external validation, I train the system to outsource worth. If I always answer discomfort with distraction, I train the system to avoid its own signals. If I always answer tiredness with artificial activation, I train the system to override its need for recovery. But the reverse is also true. If I answer discomfort with curiosity, I train awareness. If I answer tiredness with rest, I train trust. If I answer loneliness with honest connection, I train relational courage. If I answer boredom with creativity, I train possibility. If I answer urgency with pause, I train sovereignty. The loop is not only something that traps us, it is also something that can be rebuilt. That is the hopeful part. The brain learns through repetition, but it can also relearn through repetition. The same system that becomes captured by quick reward can become shaped by slower regulation. The same body that reaches automatically can learn to pause. The same mind that chases can learn to listen. So when the urge appears, the question is not, am I bad for wanting this? Shame only adds another layer of discomfort. The better question is, what is this wanting trying to do for me? Is it trying to soothe, escape, energize, connect, prove, avoid, numb, be seen, feel powerful, feel safe? Once you know what the wanting is trying to do, you can choose a cleaner response. Not always the perfect response, but a more conscious one. You may still choose the quick reward, but now you know what it serves. And sometimes, that awareness is enough to loosen the compulsion. Because the real freedom is not having any desire. It is not being above pleasure. It is being able to tell the difference between a desire that leads you deeper into life and a desire that keeps you circling the same unresolved signal. So the new frame is this. Some things feel good because they train my system to keep seeking them. Pleasure is not always nourishment. Relief is not always regulation. Desire is not always authentic. A chemical shift is not the same as well-being. And the question that changes the loop is simple. What loop is this training in me? Part 7. The somatic layer is where reward loops stop being an idea and start showing up in the body. Craving, restlessness, compulsive checking, emotional flatness after stimulation, sugar crashes, shame after indulgence, attention fragmentation, needing more to feel less, temporary relief followed by emptiness. These are not just bad habits or a lack of discipline. They are signs that the body has learned a route towards state change. The body can become trained to seek relief faster than it can recognize what it truly needs. That is the key insight here. Craving is not always a clear desire. Sometimes it is the body looking for a shortcut. Something in the system feels uncomfortable, undernourished, tense, bored, lonely, tired, unseen, or overstimulated, and the body reaches for the route it knows. The craving may appear as food, a screen, a message, stimulation, validation, or novelty. But beneath the craving may be a signal that has not yet been recognized. Restlessness often comes with this. The body cannot quite settle. There is a feeling of needing something, but not knowing what that something is. So the system begins scanning. Check the phone. Open another tab. Make a drink. Look for a snack. Reply to something. Watch something. Buy something. Search for something. The body is not necessarily seeking pleasure. It is seeking a shift. Compulsive checking is one of the clearest signs of this loop. The person checks even when they know there may be nothing new. The reward is not only the result, it is the possibility. The body has learned that checking may change the state. There might be a message, a number, a response, a price movement, a new signal. And even when nothing is there, the loop remains alive because the anticipation itself has become part of the pattern. Then there is emotional flatness after stimulation. This is one of the quieter signs. After too much input, the system may not feel excited. It may feel dull, drained, slightly numb. The stimulation promised energy, but afterwards, the body feels less connected to itself. This can happen after scrolling, binge-watching, compulsive checking, sexualized stimulation, shopping, overeating, or chasing any quick hit for too long. The body has been activated but not restored. Sugar crashes show the same principle more physically. A quick reward gives energy, taste, comfort, and a shift in state. But later, the system may dip. Fatigue, irritability, fog, or more craving can follow. Again, this is not about shame. It is about recognizing the pattern. The body may have asked for quick relief when what it actually needed was steadier nourishment, rest, hydration, or emotional regulation. Shame after indulgence often makes the loop worse. The person feels the crash, the emptiness, or the regret, and then shame enters. Shame creates discomfort. Discomfort seeks relief. Relief returns to the loop. This is why harsh self-judgment rarely frees people from compulsive patterns. It can become part of the very cycle it is trying to stop. Attention fragmentation is another somatic sign. The body becomes trained to expect novelty. Staying with one thing begins to feel uncomfortable. The mind jumps. The hand reaches. The system wants a new cue, a new reward, a new change in state. Depth begins to feel slow, not because depth is wrong, but because the nervous system has been trained by speed. This is where needing more to feel less becomes visible. The same level of stimulation no longer satisfies. More input is needed just to reach the same temporary relief. More scrolling, more sugar, more checking, more intensity, more novelty. But the more the system receives, the less sensitive it may become to simpler forms of satisfaction. Silence feels boring. Stillness feels empty. The ordinary connection feels too slow. The body has learned the spike, and the subtle signal becomes harder to hear. Temporary relief followed by emptiness is the clearest warning sign. The behavior works briefly, but afterwards there is a drop. The original need is still there, and sometimes it feels worse because now there is exhaustion, shame, or disconnection layered on top. The loop promised escape, but returned the person to the same place with less energy. This is the difference between regulated pleasure and hijacked pleasure. Regulated pleasure supports recovery, connection, meaning, and rhythm. It leaves the body more coherent. It may be simple, a meal that nourishes, music that opens emotion, movement that releases tension, touch that feels safe, laughter that brings ease, sunlight that restores rhythm, creativity that gives form to feeling, or rest that allows the system to return. Regulated pleasure does not have to be pure or perfect. It simply gives something back. Hijacked pleasure becomes compulsion, repetition, dependency, and disconnection. It narrows the field around the next cue. It teaches the body to chase relief instead of understanding need. It may feel exciting at first, but over time it often reduces freedom. The person is not choosing from wholeness. They are being pulled from discomfort. So the somatic question is not, why am I so weak? It is, what has my body learned to reach for when it does not know what it needs? That question brings compassion without removing responsibility. The body is trying to regulate, it is trying to help, but it may be using a route that no longer serves the whole system. The work is to slow the sequence down, notice the craving before the action, notice the body before the behavior, notice the signal before the loop. Where do I feel this urge? What is the sensation? Is it hunger, tiredness, loneliness, pressure, boredom, shame, fear, or lack of rhythm? What am I hoping this will change? Then, if possible, offer the body a different form of relief. Not punishment, not denial for the sake of control, a different signal, water, breath, movement, food that steadies, a direct message to someone real, a short walk, music, a journal, a pause, silence, sunlight, stretching, a boundary, sleep. The body can learn new routes, that is the hopeful part. The same nervous system that learned fast relief can learn deeper regulation. The same body that became trained to seek more can become sensitive again to what restores it. The same system that chased the next hit can learn to recognize the quieter signals of enough, because pleasure is not the enemy. Disconnection is, and the work is to return pleasure to its rightful place. Not as a trap, not as escape, not as a loop that keeps us hungry, but as part of rhythm, connection, recovery, meaning, and life. Part 8 observation practice today. Don't just ask what you want. Ask what the wanting is doing. That is the practice. Choose one craving, urge, or repetitive behavior. It might be checking your phone, reaching for sugar, opening an app, looking for a message, watching another video, checking a chart, buying something, or returning to a thought pattern that keeps pulling you back in. Before acting, pause for a moment. Don't judge yourself, not to force control, just to notice. Ask, what am I feeling before the urge? Am I tired, restless? Am I lonely, bored, anxious? Feeling frustrated or unseen? Am I experiencing overload? Feeling empty? Avoidant? Is there a signal in the body that I have not yet listened to? Then ask, what am I hoping this will change? Do I want energy, comfort, validation, distraction, relief, certainty, stimulation, connection, control? Do I want to feel less of something or more of something? Then ask, is this nourishment, relief, distraction, or compulsion? There is no need to answer perfectly. The point is to bring the loop into awareness. Sometimes the behavior may genuinely nourish you. Sometimes it may offer temporary relief. Sometimes it may distract you from something that needs attention. Sometimes it may be a compulsive route the body has learned because it works quickly, even if it does not truly restore you. Afterwards, check again. How do I feel 10 minutes later? Do I feel more grounded, clearer, steadier, and more connected to myself? Or do I feel flatter, foggier, more restless, more ashamed, more scattered, or still hungry for something else? The prompt to carry is, what loop is this training? For the optional layer, replace one quick reward behavior with a slower regulating signal for 10 minutes. Take a walk, breathe slowly, drink water, sit in sunlight, stretch, journal. Listen to music that steadies rather than spikes. Message someone directly instead of seeking vague validation. Step away from the screen. Let the body settle before deciding what it really wants. This is not about punishment or denial. It is about learning the difference between a loop that keeps you hungry and a signal that brings you back to yourself. Because sometimes the urge is not the enemy. Sometimes the urge is the doorway. It shows you where the system is asking for care, rhythm, contact, rest, meaning, or regulation. And the more conscious you become of what the wanting is doing, the less the wanting has to decide for you. So, as we bring episode 7 towards a close, the central point is this. The brain does not have simple happiness buttons. Dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, endorphins, and the wider chemical systems of the body are not little switches we press for pleasure, love, motivation, or relief. They are part of loops. They participate in seeking, bonding, reward, regulation, pain relief, rhythm, attachment, attention, and adaptation. The lie is not that these chemicals matter. They do matter. The lie is that they work like buttons. Once we understand that, we can begin to look at our own behaviors differently. Not with shame, but with clarity. Not why am I so weak, but what loop has my system learned? Not why do I want this, but what is this wanting doing? Not does this feel good, but does this restore me or does it only interrupt discomfort for a moment? Because not everything that feels good is regulating you. Some things feel good because they briefly interrupt the discomfort. They shift the state, they give relief, they pull attention away from the body. They offer novelty, validation, sweetness, stimulation, certainty, or possibility. But if the original signal remains unmet, the loop often returns. The body reaches again. The mind justifies again. The system repeats. That is why awareness matters. Awareness is the interruption between the cue and behavior. It is the pause before the scroll, the breath before the craving, the question before the purchase, the moment before checking, refreshing, reacting, or chasing the next hit. It is the space where you ask what the system actually needs, rather than automatically giving it what the loop has trained it to seek. This is not about becoming anti-pleasure. Pleasure matters. Relief matters. Comfort matters. The body needs enjoyment, beauty, play, touch, taste, music, movement, connection, and rest. But pleasure becomes distorted when it no longer returns us to life, but keeps us circling avoidance, dependency, emptiness, or repetition. So the invitation from this episode is simple. Learn the difference between pleasure that restores and pleasure that captures. Learn the aftertaste. Learn the signal before the urge. Learn what your body is really asking for beneath the wanting. And this leads directly into episode 8. If feel-good chemicals are not simple happiness buttons, then the next question becomes, what happens when the system is overloaded by too much input? Because the modern brain is not only chasing reward, it is also drowning in noise. In episode 8, we move into cognitive overload, attention fatigue, and the cost of too many signals. We will explore how the mind becomes saturated, how attention fragments under constant input, and how the nervous system begins to lose the capacity to distinguish what matters from what merely demands reaction.